The jungle at night was never silent. It breathed and whispered, alive with the calls of strange creatures. The moonlight spilled through the tall alien trees, casting long shadows that moved with the wind. Evan walked carefully along the narrow trail, carrying a small pack over his shoulder. He was here to deliver supplies to a trading post on the far side of the valley. It was supposed to be an easy walk, a simple job, nothing dangerous. But the deeper he went, the more uneasy he felt. The air smelled of damp earth and something sharp like metal. His boots sank slightly into the moss-covered ground. He listened to the sounds, clicking insects, distant hoots, and the rustle of unseen animals. Then it came, a sound that didn't belong, a sharp, desperate cry that cut through the night. It was the sound of pain. It was the sound of someone calling for help. Evan froze. The voice came again, weaker, but still there, without thinking. He left the path and pushed through the thick vines. The leaves brushed against his face, and the roots tried to trip him. The cry grew louder. Guiding him like a beacon, he broke through into a small clearing. There, half hidden under a fallen branch, lay an alien girl. Her skin was pale, with a faint shimmer, her hair tangled and wet with sweat. One leg was bent at a strange angle, and blood soaked the ground beneath her. Her breathing was uneven, each inhale a struggle. When she saw him, her wide silver eyes filled with both fear and hope. Help. She whispered in a voice that trembled. Evan dropped to his knees beside her. What happened? He asked. She shook her head quickly, her eyes darting toward the dark trees. That's when he heard it, a deep, low growl that seemed to vibrate. In his chest, the shadows moved from between the trees. A massive beast stepped forward. Its fur was dark as midnight, broken only by the faint glint of scars across its body. Its eyes glowed yellow, and its jaws dripped with thick saliva. It was bigger than any wolf he had ever seen, its shoulders as high as his chest. The alien girl's hand clutched his arm. Run, she hissed. You can't fight it. But Evan didn't move. The beast lowered its head and crept forward. Its claws dug into the earth with each step. Evan's heart pounded, but his legs stayed firm. He knew if he ran, the girl wouldn't make it. The beast's growl deepened, its muscles bunching as it prepared to leap. Evan grabbed a fallen branch from the ground. It wasn't much, just a piece of wood, rough and splintered, but it was all he had. The alien girl tried to push herself up, but she collapsed with a sharp cry of pain. The sound made the beast snap its head toward her, its lips curling back. Evan stepped between them. Then it happened in a blur. The beast lunged, a dark blur of teeth and claws. Evan swung the branch with all his strength. It cracked against the beast's side, but it didn't stop. Jaws like steel clamped down on his arm. Pain shot through him so fast it stole his breath. The force was crushing, and he could feel the teeth sinking deep. His vision blurred. But he kept hitting the beast again and again. The alien girl screamed, trying to drag herself closer. The beast finally released him, snarling, and stumbled back a step. Evan staggered, blood pouring from the deep wound in his arm. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. He gripped the branch tighter, ready for another attack. But the beast's ears twitched. It seemed to hear something in the distance. With a final growl, it backed away into the shadows. Its glowing eyes lingered for a moment before disappearing into the trees. The clearing was suddenly quiet again, except for the sound of Evan's ragged breathing. The alien girl crawled toward him, her hands shaking. You're hurt, she whispered, pressing her small hands against the wound. Her touch was warm, but he could feel the strength leaving his body. She spoke again, this time in her own language. Evan didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone, fear, and confusion. He caught only one word in the middle of her speech. Why? He blinked at her, his head heavy. Because I could. He managed to say, his voice hoarse, her eyes widened. As if no one had ever said such a thing to her before. Evan's knees gave out, and he sank to the ground, the last thing he saw. Before darkness claimed him was the alien girl leaning over him. Her silver eyes glistened, and her lips moved as if she was calling for someone. Somewhere in the distance, heavy footsteps approached. Evan's eyes opened slowly, the world around him spinning in strange colors. He was lying on his back, the smell of smoke and herbs filling the air. Above him, a woven roof of leaves and branches swayed slightly with the wind. His arm throbbed with sharp, burning pain. Every heartbeat sending fire through the wound when he tried to move. Something warm pressed against him, holding him still. He turned his head and saw the alien girl from before, sitting close, her hands still pressed to his arm. Her eyes flickered with relief when she noticed he was awake. "You live?" she said softly, her voice carrying both surprise and gratitude. Evan swallowed, his throat dry. Where am I?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are in my people's camp," she answered. Her words were broken, but clear enough for him to understand. "You took the bite." "For me," she added, her silver eyes lowering as if she carried guilt. Evan shifted slightly, wincing as pain shot through his arm. It wasn't. "Something to think about," he said. "You were in danger." The girl looked at him strangely, as if humans were something she had only heard about in old stories. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked to clean the wound. Evan glanced at his arm and saw the deep marks where the beast's teeth had sunk in. The flesh was swollen, the skin darkened around the edges. A strange heat pulsed from it, making his fingers feel numb. "That bite," she said quietly. "It kills most." Her words made his stomach tighten. "How long do I have?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, taking a small pouch from her belt, she opened it and pulled out leaves that gave off a sharp, almost bitter scent. Crushing them in her hands, she pressed them to his wound. The sting was immediate, but with it came a dull relief. "This slows the poison," she explained, "but only the healers can stop it fully." Evan nodded slowly, realizing how close he was to death. He studied her face, noticing the faint lines of exhaustion under her eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment, then said Lyra. The name felt strange but beautiful on his tongue. "And you are?" she asked in return. "Evan," he replied. She repeated it slowly, as if trying to memorize the sound. Her gaze lingered on him, filled with a mix of curiosity and something else he couldn't name. "You should not have stayed," she murmured. "The beast would not have hunted you if you had run." Evan let out a faint breath of amusement despite the pain. "Yeah? But you wouldn't have made it," he said, before Lyra could answer. Heavy footsteps approached the tent. The flap was pushed aside, and two tall alien warriors stepped inside. They were armed with long spears and wore leather armor decorated with carved bones. Their eyes scanned Evan from head to toe before resting on Lyra. One spoke in a low, commanding tone in their own language. Lyra replied sharply, her voice tense. Evan couldn't understand the words, but he could tell it was an argument. Finally, the taller warrior stepped outside, and the other stayed at the entrance like a guard. Lyra sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "They want to take you to the chief," she said. Evan tried to sit up, but Lyra quickly placed a hand on his chest. "Not yet. You are weak," she said firmly. He could see the worry in her eyes, but also a quiet strength. "You saved me," she whispered after a moment. "That is not normal." Evan tilted his head slightly. "Not normal for humans or for your people." "For mine," she admitted. "Here, most only protect their own." Evan frowned. "Then maybe it's time someone changed that." Her eyes softened, as if his words carried more weight than he realized. The guard at the entrance shifted impatiently, tapping his spear against the ground. Lyra looked toward the sound, then back at Evan. "We will go soon," she said. "But you must be ready." He gave a small nod, his strength still fragile. Lyra offered him a cup made from a carved shell filled with dark liquid. "Drink," she said. "It will help with pain." Evan took a cautious sip, the bitter taste, making him wince. Almost immediately, the burning in his arm dulled. Replaced by a heavy warmth spreading through his body, he leaned back against the woven mat beneath him. Feeling his eyelids grow heavy, Lyra adjusted the bandage on his arm, her fingers gentle despite the rough cloth. "You should rest," she murmured. "The chief will want answers, and your answers will decide much." Evan's mind drifted as the warmth of the drink pulled him toward sleep. The last thing he heard before darkness claimed him was Lyra's voice, soft, almost like a promise. "I will speak for you." Outside, the jungle night whispered again. But this time, Evan felt he was not alone. Somewhere beyond the campfires, a beast howled. Its voice long and haunting. Evan didn't know if it was the same one or another. But he knew one thing. His life had changed the moment he stepped between the beast and the wounded girl, and now, in a place where no human had ever stood before. The next bite might not come from an animal. It might come from the judgment of her people. Evan woke to the sound of drums, slow and deep, each beat like a heartbeat echoing through the air. He opened his eyes and saw the soft glow of morning light spilling into the tent through the woven walls. The air smelled of wood smoke and something sweet, maybe from the strange flowers strung above him. His arm ached. But it was now wrapped in fresh bandages, the marks of the beast's bite hidden beneath layers of clean cloth. Lyra was gone, but he could hear voices outside, speaking quickly in a language he didn't know. He sat up slowly, feeling the stiffness in his body. The world still a little hazy from the drink she had given him. Before he could stand, the tent flap lifted, and two alien warriors stepped inside. Their tall frames filled the space, their faces marked with dark paint and scars. They didn't speak to him, just motioned for him to follow. Evan hesitated, then rose to his feet, his legs unsteady but willing. As he stepped outside, the camp came into view in full daylight. Dozens of alien huts made from wood, hides, and woven vines stood in a rough circle around a central fire pit. Children ran between them, their skin painted in bright colors, their laughter mixing with the rhythmic drums. Warriors stood near the edges of the camp, spears in hand, eyes sharp. Everyone who saw Evan stopped what they were doing. Some stared. In silence, others whispered to each other. He could feel their eyes following him, measuring him, weighing him. The two warriors led him through the camp toward the largest structure. It was built from massive beams of carved wood and covered with thick animal skins. Strange symbols were painted across its front, the colors faded but still strong. At the entrance, Lyra stood waiting, her hair neatly tied back, her silver eyes watching him closely. She stepped forward and touched his uninjured arm, a small gesture of reassurance. "You must speak carefully," she whispered. "The chief is a great man, but also proud." Evan nodded, unsure if anything he said would matter to someone like that. The warriors pulled back the heavy skin covering the entrance, and the smell of burning herbs washed over him. Inside, the light was dim, lit only by the glow of a central fire pit around it. Several older aliens sat in a half-circle, their eyes sharp, their bodies draped in layers of beads and furs, and in the center, seated on a carved wooden throne, was the chief. He was taller than the others, his skin marked with deep lines of age and strength. A great headdress made of feathers and polished bone rested on his head. Evan stopped a few steps inside, the warriors closing the entrance behind him. The chief's gaze swept over him slowly, as if taking in every detail. Finally, he spoke in a voice deep and heavy, the kind that carried weight even without shouting. "You are the human who took the bite," the chief said, his accent thick but his words clear. Evan gave a small nod. "I suppose that's me." The chief's expression didn't change, but a low murmur ran through the elders. "You bled for one of ours," the chief continued. "Why?" Evan glanced at Lyra, who stood at the edge of the room, her eyes urging him to answer. "She was hurt," he said simply. "I couldn't just leave her." The chief leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "You risked your life for someone not of your kind." The chief said slowly, "That is rare." "Even among my people," Evan shrugged lightly, ignoring the throbbing in his arm. "I didn't think about who she was, just that she needed help," he said. The chief was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on Evan. Then he spoke again. But this time in his own language, one of the elders replied quickly, their voice tense. Evan couldn't understand, but he could feel the tension in the air thickening. Lyra stepped forward suddenly, speaking to the chief in her own tongue. Her voice was steady but strong, each word carrying force. The chief raised a hand, and the room fell silent. He looked back at Evan, his eyes unreadable. "You are under my protection. For now," he said at last. Some of the elders shifted uncomfortably at his words, but the chief continued. "Your presence here will not be ignored." Evan frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," the chief said, "that there are those who will see you as a threat. And they will test you." The fire crackled between them, casting long shadows on the walls. Evan didn't know if that was a warning or a challenge. The chief rose from his seat, towering over everyone in the room. "Rest today," he said. "Tomorrow you will stand before the council." The meeting was over as quickly as it began. The warrior stepped forward to escort Evan out. As he passed Lyra, she gave him a small, encouraging nod. Outside, the drums had stopped, replaced by the low hum of conversation. Evan walked back toward the tent they had given him. His mind heavy with questions, the chief's words echoed in his head. Protection for now. It didn't feel like safety. It felt like standing in the eye of a storm. Lyra joined him as they walked, her steps matching his. "You spoke well," she said softly, "but tomorrow?" "Tomorrow is what matters." Evan didn't answer, but he knew she was right. Somewhere deep in the jungle, far beyond the camp, a beast howled. It was a long, low sound that seemed to travel through the trees and into his bones. Evan's jaw tightened. If the council's judgment didn't kill him, something else just might. The camp was quiet that night, quieter than Evan expected. The usual sounds of the jungle seemed to hold back, as if even the creatures outside the village sensed something important was coming. Evan sat near the small fire inside his tent, the flicker of the flames painting shadows on the walls. His injured arm rested in a sling, wrapped in fresh cloth that smelled faintly of herbs. Lyra was gone, called away by the healers to help. With something he didn't like being left alone, not here, not when he could feel the eyes of strangers watching from the dark every so often. The flap of the tent would shift slightly, and he would catch sight of a figure passing by. Some would glance in and quickly look away. Others would stare longer before moving on. It felt like the whole camp was holding its breath. Waiting for something, a soft voice broke the silence. "You should know what tomorrow means," it said. Evan turned and saw an older alien woman stepping into the tent. She was small compared to the warriors. Her back slightly bent, but her eyes were sharp and bright. Her skin was lined with age, and she wore a necklace made from dozens of small, carved bones. She moved slowly, but with purpose, sitting across from him at the fire. Evan frowned slightly. "And who are you?" She gave a faint smile. "A healer. And someone who remembers the old ways." Her gaze dropped to his arm. "You took the beast's bite for one of ours." He nodded cautiously. "Yes, a ka." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "In our law, the old law, that means something." Evan watched her closely. What kind of something? It means you are bound, she said simply. Bound to the one you saved. Her words hung in the air. Evan blinked. Not sure he heard right. Bound? You mean? Like I owe her something. The woman shook her head. No, not a debt. A bond. She traced a finger in the dirt between them, drawing a circle in the eyes of the old ways. When one bleeds for another, they become as kin. Sometimes more than kin. Her eyes met his. It cannot be undone. Evan leaned back slightly, feeling the weight of her words. So, you're telling me your people are going to see me as part of Lyra's family now? The healer gave a slow nod. Some will honor that. Others will hate it. He rubbed the back of his neck with his good hand. That explains the way they look at me, he muttered. The healer's voice softened. There are those who fear change. And you are change. Evan stared into the fire, the flames twisting and curling like the thoughts in his head. He barely knew Lyra, and yet this law, this bond, was already shaping his fate. Does she know? He asked. Yes, the healer said. She knows. But I do not think she understands all that it means either. Before Evan could ask more, the tent flap moved again. Lyra stepped inside, her expression tense when she saw the healer. You shouldn't be here, Lyra said sharply in her own language. The healer only smiled faintly, rising to her feet. Knowledge is not a crime, she replied before walking out into the night. Evan watched her go, then turned to Lyra. Your healer friend told me something. Something about being bound. Lyra froze, her silver eyes flickering with something between surprise and worry. She should not have said that. Lyra murmured, so it's true. Evan pressed. Lyra's hands tightened at her sides. It is. But it's an old law. One the council no longer uses. Evan raised an eyebrow. No longer uses. Judging by the way everyone stares at me, they still believe it. Lyra looked away, her voice low. The law may be old, but the people's hearts are older. She sat down near the fire, her gaze on the flames. When someone bleeds for you, the bond is meant to protect both, but it can also be used against them. Evan felt a chill. Used how? Lyra hesitated. If someone wishes you harm, they must go through me. And if they wish me harm, they must go through you. A bitter smile crossed her face. It means your enemies and mine will soon be the same. Evan exhaled slowly. Great. Sounds like I've just doubled my problems. Lyra's eyes softened. It also means I am not allowed to let you face them alone. The words carried a quiet weight, like a promise she didn't have to make, but chose to. Outside, a sudden loud call rang out. Echoing through the camp, Lyra stiffened. That is the council's signal. They are summoning the people. Evan stood, ignoring the ache in his arm. Now, I thought it was tomorrow. Lyra's expression was unreadable. The chief must have changed it. Maybe because of you, they stepped out into the night. The air heavy with tension around them, warriors were gathering, torches in hand. The entire village seemed to be moving toward the large central space. Evan could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him again. Some curious, some hostile, a few even respectful. As they walked, Lyra stayed close, her arm brushing his as if to remind him he wasn't alone. The healer's words echoed in his mind, bound. As kin, it didn't matter if he believed in their old law or not, the tribe believed in it. And that meant his fate was no longer just his own. Somewhere in the crowd ahead. The chief's deep voice rose above the murmurs, and Evan knew whatever was about to happen next would decide far more than just whether he stayed or left. The central gathering space was lit by dozens of torches, their flames bending in the cool night wind. The smell of burning wood mixed with the sharp scent of the jungle. Evan stood at the edge of the crowd, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. The alien warriors had formed a wide circle around the fire pit in the center. Beyond them, the elders sat on carved wooden seats, their faces painted in patterns of red and black. The chief stood at the front, his tall figure framed by the flickering firelight. Lyra stayed close at Evan's side, her gaze fixed on the chief. When the drumbeat stopped, the chief raised a hand and the crowd fell silent. This human, the chief's deep voice carried over the gathering, saved one of ours by facing the great beast. A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. Some in awe, some in disbelief. He took the bite meant to kill her, and by the old ways. This act cannot be ignored, the chief continued. Evan felt his stomach tighten. Here it was, the moment that could change everything. But the chief's voice hardened. There are those who question if this human's courage was luck, or strength, or a trick of fate. At those words, movement stirred at the far side of the circle. A group of warriors stepped forward, their armor marked with different colors than the rest. One of them, broad-shouldered with a jagged scar down his jaw, pointed his spear toward Evan. If he is truly worthy, the warrior said loudly, let him prove it in the proving ground. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Gasps, shouts, and the sound of boots shifting on dirt. Lyra's hand tightened on Evan's arm. This is not good, she whispered. Evan glanced at her. I'm guessing the proving ground isn't a place where we have tea and a nice chat. Her silver eyes were sharp. It's where warriors are tested, where the unworthy are broken. The chief looked from the warriors to Evan, his expression unreadable. Do you accept the challenge? The chief asked. Evan's heart thudded hard. If he said no, they would see him as a coward. If he said yes, he might not survive. But with the entire village watching, he knew there was only one answer he could give. I accept, he said. His voice steady, a roar of approval rose from part of the crowd. While others watched in silence, the scar-jawed warrior stepped closer. His grin sharp. Tomorrow, when the sun is highest, we see what you are made of. The chief raised his hand again, silencing the noise. Until then, the human is under my watch, he said firmly. The warriors backed away, their eyes never leaving Evan. The crowd began to scatter, some already whispering about what would happen. Lyra turned to Evan as they walked away from the fire. Do you understand what you've agreed to? She asked, her voice tight. Evan smirked faintly, despite the tension. Not really. But I'm guessing. You'll tell me. She didn't smile. They will release another beast into the proving ground. One stronger than the first, and I have to kill it. Evan asked. Lyra nodded. Or survive long enough to make it flee. But it will not flee easily. They reached the tent, and Lyra pulled back the flap, motioning for him to go inside. Once they were alone, her shoulders dropped slightly. I should have spoken against it, she said. But if I did, they would only say I was protecting you because of the bond. Evan sat down heavily near the fire pit inside. Maybe you were. Maybe I need it. Lyra shook her head. This is not a fight you can win alone. But I cannot be there with you. She moved to a small chest in the corner and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Unwrapping it, she revealed a short spear, with a dark wooden shaft and a blade that shimmered like silver. This belonged to my brother, she said quietly. He fell in the proving ground 2 years ago. Evan accepted it with both hands, feeling the strange weight of the weapon. It is light, he said. Light to move fast, she replied. Heavy enough to kill. Her gaze met his. Promise me you won't throw it away unless you must. I promise, he said. That night, Evan slept little. He could hear the distant calls of beasts in the jungle, their cries echoing in the dark. Every sound reminded him of teeth, claws. And the moment he had stepped in front of Lyra, by dawn, he was already awake. Sitting with the spear across his knees, Lyra brought him water and strange bread made from ground roots. You'll need strength, she said, her voice quieter than usual. As the sun climbed higher, the drums began again, calling the village to gather. Evan stepped out of the tent, the spear in his hand. The air was thick with heat and tension. Every step toward the proving ground felt like walking deeper into the mouth of the beast. The proving ground was not what Evan expected. It was a wide pit carved into the earth, the walls high and made of packed clay. The floor was bare dirt, stained in places where old battles had been fought. Around the rim, the entire village had gathered, their faces painted and their voices a low hum of anticipation. Drums beat slowly, deep and steady, like a giant's heartbeat. Evan stood at one end of the pit, the short spear in his hand, the weight of it strange but comforting. The sun hung directly overhead, pouring light into the arena. Across from him, a heavy wooden gate creaked open from the shadows inside. A low growl rolled out. The sound was deep enough to make the hairs on the back of his neck stand. The beast stepped forward, and the crowd fell silent. It was larger than the one that had bitten him, its shoulders nearly as high as his head. Its fur was mottled black and gray, its muscles rippling beneath the skin. Its eyes were the same, glowing yellow, but this time they burned with more intelligence. Long scars marked its body, signs of battles it had survived. Its breath came out in hot, steaming clouds. The gate slammed shut behind it, the sound echoing like a warning. The beast's gaze locked onto Evan, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. Evan's grip on the spear tightened, sweat already sliding down his back. The drums quickened, and the beast began to move. It circled him slowly at first, paused silent on the dirt. Evan turned with it, keeping his spear pointed toward its chest. The sun glared off the blade, and the beast's eyes flicked to it briefly. Then, without warning, it lunged. Evan sidestepped, thrusting the spear toward its neck. The beast twisted with unnatural speed, the spear glancing off its thick hide. Its shoulder slammed into him, sending him sprawling into the dirt. The crowd roared, some in excitement, others in mockery. Evan rolled to his feet, shaking the dust from his eyes. The beast snarled, its teeth bared. It came at him again, jaws snapping. Evan dropped low and jammed the spear into the ground at an angle. The beast's chest slammed into the shaft, stopping it for just a heartbeat. Evan used that moment to roll away, pulling the weapon free. The beast wheeled around, more cautious now, its movements slower, but still full of deadly intent. From above, he heard Lyra's voice calling something in her language, sharp and urgent. He didn't know the words, but he understood. She was guiding him. Evan adjusted his stance, feet spread wide, weight balanced. The beast circled again, and this time he matched its rhythm. Their steps formed a strange dance, predator and prey switching roles with every heartbeat. The beast lunged for his injured arm. Evan twisted, letting its teeth snap on empty air. In the same motion, he drove the spear into its flank. The blade sank halfway before the beast's roar shook the air. It jerked back, ripping the weapon from his hands. Blood splattered the dirt, dark and steaming. The crowd erupted, some shouting his name, others screaming for the beast. Evan dove for the spear, grabbing it just as the beast charged again. He spun at the last second, dragging the blade across its side. The wound was deep now, and the beast staggered. But it was not done. With a roar, it leaped high, more force than before. Evan threw himself forward under it, hitting the dirt and rolling to his knees. As the beast landed behind him, he whirled and thrust the spear upward. The blade found the gap beneath its jaw. The force of the strike drove both of them backward. The beast's scream was short and sharp before it collapsed. Dust rose in a heavy cloud around them. Evan stood over it, chest heaving, every muscle. Screaming in pain, the drum stopped and silence fell over the pit. Then the first voice shouted from the crowd. It was Lyra, her tone fierce and proud. Others joined in, chanting, their voices echoing off the pit walls. Evan pulled the spear free, the weight of what he had done settling on him. The beast lay still, its blood soaking into the earth. The chief stepped forward to the edge of the arena, his eyes locked on Evan. The scar-jawed warrior who had challenged him stood nearby, his expression tight and unreadable. Evan raised the spear in a tired salute. This wasn't just survival. It was a statement. He had stood in their proving ground and walked away. Two warriors descended into the pit, one taking the beast's body, the other escorting Evan toward the gate. As he climbed out, Lyra was there, her eyes shining with something between relief and pride. You did it, she said softly. Evan gave a tired smile. Yeah. Still not sure how, she shook her head. You fought like one of us. The chief approached, his shadow long in the sunlight. Tomorrow, he said, we speak of what comes next. Evan nodded, but deep down, he knew this wasn't over. Victory in the pit was only the beginning. Asterisk. The night after the proving ground was alive with firelight. Torches lined the center of the village, casting tall, dancing shadows against the huts. The smell of roasted meat and burning herbs drifted through the air. Evan sat on a low stool. Near the central fire, the short spear resting across his knees. His body ached from the fight, but his mind was sharp, watching the way the people moved around him. Some looked at him with cautious respect, others with open curiosity. The children whispered to each other and dared quick glances his way. Lyra sat beside him, her silver eyes catching the glow of the flames. She hadn't stopped watching him since he left the arena. Every so often she would reach over and check the bandages on his arm. When the drums began, the crowd parted. The chief stepped into the open space, his great headdress swaying with each step. His presence drew silence. The only sound the crackle of the fire. Evan rose to his feet, unsure if he should speak first. The chief's gaze swept over him, lingering on the spear in his hands. You have fought in our proving ground and lived, the chief said, his deep voice carrying through the gathering. You have killed the beast that has taken many of our own. Murmurs ran through the crowd, some voices proud, others still doubtful. You stood where others would have fled, and for that, your courage is known to all here. The chief continued. Evan stood still, feeling the weight of each word. The chief's expression hardened slightly. But courage alone does not decide your place among us. Evan's chest tightened. Here was the part that mattered. The chief gestured toward Lyra, who rose and stepped forward. This human, the chief said, saved one of ours at the cost of his own blood. By the old ways, that act binds him to her, he continued, his tone neither soft nor harsh. The crowd stirred, the words clearly carrying great weight among them. Evan caught Lyra's glance. There was no fear in her eyes, only a strange calm. The chief looked directly at Evan. Do you accept this bond? He asked. Evan hesitated for only a heartbeat. He remembered the healer's words, the whispered law, and what it meant. If he accepted, he would be tied to Lyra in the eyes of her people. For better or worse, if he refused, it might mean rejection. Or worse, exile. He looked at Lyra, saw the quiet strength in her gaze, and nodded. I accept, he said clearly. A ripple went through the crowd, some approving, some muttering. The chief gave a single nod. Then, from this day, no one here shall call you outsider. He stepped forward and removed a carved pendant from around his own neck. It was shaped like a claw, polished smooth with age. This mark, the chief said, holding it high, is given only to those who are of us. He placed it around Evan's neck, the cool weight of it resting against his chest. Lyra reached out and adjusted it, her fingers brushing lightly against him. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some voices chanting softly. The scar-jawed warrior from before stepped forward from the crowd. For a moment, Evan thought he might challenge the chief's decision. Instead, the warrior gave a sharp nod. "He fought well," he said simply. Before stepping back, the chief raised his hand and the drums began again. This time, faster and louder. "This night, we celebrate," he declared. "Tomorrow, we prepare." Evan caught the last word, prepare, and frowned slightly. After the formalities ended, the villagers brought food and drink. Some approached Evan with small gifts: a strip of leather, a carved bead, a piece of cloth dyed bright red. Lyra stayed close, introducing those who came and quietly guiding him through their customs. He could feel the shift in the way they looked at him now. Not as a stranger, not entirely as one of them yet, but as someone who had earned a place. As the fire burned low, the chief approached again. He crouched beside Evan, his deep voice low enough for only him and Lyra to hear. "You have won today, human," he said. "But winning is only the first step. There are eyes beyond this camp watching you." "Now," the chief continued, "and they may not come with peace." Evan's jaw tightened. "Enemies." The chief nodded. "The beast you killed was not just a wild animal. It was being tracked by another clan. They will know you killed it," he added. "And they will not forgive easily." Evan understood then the fight in the proving ground had been more than a test. It had been a signal, one that would reach far beyond the walls of this village. Lyra's hand rested lightly on his arm. "Whatever comes, you will not face it alone," she said. The chief's eyes softened briefly, but his voice stayed firm. "You are bound to her, and through her, to all of us," he said. "That means our battles are now your battles." Evan met his gaze. "Then I'll be ready." The chief gave a short nod and stood, his shadow stretching across the dying fire. When the drums finally stopped and the villagers returned to their homes, Evan sat in the quiet glow of the embers, the pendant heavy around his neck. Lyra leaned against him lightly, her voice just above a whisper. "You didn't just survive, Evan. You belong." He thought of the beast's glowing eyes, the weight of the spear, the roar of the crowd. He thought of the chief's words and the shadow of danger still ahead. And as the last spark of the fire flickered out, Evan knew this was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning.